Hello again everyone, welcome back. With the release of Settlers of Kalgur, a myriad of new skills were added to the game. Among these were the Retaliation skills, which bring with them a new and unique playstyle to the game. These skills require the user to block hits before they become usable. Once they do, however, they deliver massive hits due to the fact that they have inherent higher stats and higher effectiveness of added damage than most skills. In today's build, I'll be showcasing my take on these, leveraging some very powerful uniques like Thunder Fists and Oriana's prototype to deliver massive lightning hits with every single strike. If you are looking to try out these new skills, maybe the new Gladiator ascendancy, or you just want a build that is able to deliver massive amounts of damage with every single hit, look no further. Let's get into the build. Also, very quickly, I'm trying to get the channel monetized, so if you could take the time to subscribe, I would really appreciate that. Thank you. So, having a quick look at our character here, as you can see, we're currently level 90, and we are at 76, 75, minus 200, and 75. We also have double block capped, because we are using versatile combatant, so it only goes up to 65%. On top of that, we have 4000 life and about 600 energy shield, but that doesn't really matter. So starting with our gear, which is the main part that makes this build work, we make usage of a few uniques. Firstly, we make use of Thunder Fist for essentially the increased effect of lightning ailment, which gives us a lot of damage, because we are always applying, at most enemies, 50% shocks, and the added lightning damage goes very well with our eviscerate setup that we have on the gloves. As you can see, it has very high effectiveness of added damage, so level 30 here makes a lot of work for us. Next, we have a Paradoxica here. This one in particular is decently expensive. It should be around 4 divines. I got very lucky and sniped this for 25c. However, instead of this one, you can actually run the one I was running before this, which I think I still have. Maybe I put it here. Yes. You can easily run, instead of the lightning damage, run Elemental 10. And this will be a bit less damage, but this one is far cheaper to get you started than the one I have here. Other than that, other uniques that we use, obviously the Oriana's prototype is kind of what makes this build tick. It makes so we can't deal any non-lightning damage, but instead the enemy's lightning resistance is equal to ours, which is very strong for us in particular. Also, armor will apply to lightning damage taken from hits, but not dots. Which means, if you ever see the lightning donut mod on enemies, run. Or dash into it. The moment you touch it, you are dead. You cannot mitigate lightning dots at all. You'll mitigate that with your minus 200 lightning resistance, and you're going to be dead in seconds. In less than seconds, in a single second. So, keep that in mind. Definitely not hardcore viable, I will say that. And the rest of the gear is going to be rares. However, there's a couple of rares that are very important to talk about here. You are going to need a couple of mirrored pieces. And I don't mean use a mirror on it, I mean the new added this league, but from the old League of Calandra, that allows you to get negative modifiers on your pieces of gear. So here I use both this ring with minus 57% to lightning resistance, and an amulet with minus 91 to lightning resistance. Your negative resistance is capped at minus 200, so there's no point going above that. And this actually works very well, because the negative always comes associated with a very high positive, so you can look for very high life rolls or resistance rolls on these, or even stats, because we're going to need a lot of stats. And that works out pretty well. So keep in mind, you want to get as close to minus 200 as possible, and the rest of the gear here is going to be very simple. we want to cap our cold, our chaos, and our fire without adding any lightning resistance. And where possible, get life and either dexterity or intelligence. So here, as you can see, we have life, dual resistance, intelligence, and I haven't put any Eldritch currency on it yet, but I need to do that. On the amulet, as I said, it's a mirrored base. Here the only things we really care about is the dexterity, which we need quite a bit, so this is very good. The minus resistance is very, very good. And the global critical strike multiplier is very nice, as we do have a little bit of crit on our build. On the shield, as you can see here, we have a very nice roll of reduced extra damage taken from critical strikes. We have a lot of life, and armor and evasion, and a crafted resistance. This could potentially be changed, and this is probably the piece that is the weakest that I have, and is the one that is most likely to be changed in the near future. This ring as well, just life, resistance, and a crafted intelligence mod, which I no longer need. So that is going to change into something else, but for now, that's where we're at. On the belt, potentially you can use here, and most people are using Darkness Enthroned with 2 Murderous Eye Jewels with a lot of lightning flat on it. And you can potentially do that. It's going to give you a lot more damage than this one. However, at the moment I need the resistances, I need the life, and this is actually a very good belt itself, so I opted to stick with it, and I potentially will swap into that, but I need to fix some of my resistances before I can do that. So, if you're like me and don't have the ability to use the Darkness Enthroned, a Stygian Vise with a well-crafted Murderous Eye Jewel with a lot of flat will be enough for now. And finally, the last one, ignore the implicits, they're both useless for this build. We have life, we have very high resistances, and movement speed. Very simple pair of boots. On the flasks, these aren't even rolled. I paid 0 attention to these so far because I haven't needed, but you want a life flask obviously, preferably with instant recovery and bleed. And then Force is nice to move through enemies, but we don't really care about suppress. We're not capping suppress with this build. Granite is very good because, as I said, through Dorian's prototype, you'll be defending lightning hits with your armor, so we actually want a little bit of armor. And then movement speed, and I have a Jade. Potentially, both the Jade and the Quartz will be swapped in the future. Bottled Fate is very, very, very good for this build. And if you are super rich, Progenesis is also very, very good for this build. Progenesis is good for basically any build, but works very well with this. So yeah, this is currently our gear. I opted to also have the Eightful Accuser. Some bosses don't really hit very often, so having this to swap in for one of our rings is quite nice as a possibility. And it's very cheap, this costed me 5C. For the links themselves, I run Mark on Hit with Assassin's Mark and Life Tap, Determination, Wrath, Shield Charge, Blood and Sand, Flame Dash, Smite. Smite is here just for the Val version, because the aura it gives grants us a lot of lightning damage. Our main 6 link is Crushing Fist, increased critical strike damage, Fist of War, Volatility, Awakened added lightning damage, which is surprisingly pretty cheap, and Expert Retaliation support. Most people don't use this and instead use Fortify. However, while trying out Fortify, it felt like I'm permanently waiting for the skill itself to come off cooldown, because it actually has a decently long cooldown, Crushing Fist, so I've opted to go with Expert Retaliation, and honestly I'm not lacking damage at the moment. I'm doing like 13 million DPS, so this feels very, very good. On the gloves, I have Eviscerate with Expert Retaliation, Volatility, and increased critical strike damage. And on the boots, we have Molten Shell, linked to a cast when damage taken. And potentially here I should have increased duration, but I don't because I forgot to buy it. There we go. And those are the links as of right now. On the passive tree, we are doing a lot here, so please bear with me. As you can see, the passive tree, and this is what we are anointing. This is decently pricey, but is very, very, very good for this build. As you can see, the passive tree is pretty simple. We go from the gladiator starting zone, we path to all the retaliation nodes, like so. The reason why we don't really need a lot of crit is because of this node. Every 4th retaliation skill you use is always a critical strike, so we don't much need crit chance, and much rather focus on crit strike damage. Then just grab life. I opted to grab this aura reservation here, otherwise I couldn't fit blood and sand. And just go up here, grab all of this stuff for retaliation, for block, a bit of armor and life here, retaliation here, and retaliation skills fortify on melee hit, so you don't even really need fortification to be able to get fortify. And then grab crit and go here, and I opted to put my impossible escape here. Now, this impossible escape is actually decently expensive. Oh, it's actually come down. I bought it for 3 divines. It's now at 1 divine, so it's fairly attainable and allows you to put points around Vol Pact, which saves us a lot of points here. Otherwise you need to pad here to get life and mana leech. But this way you can get all of these nodes for essentially free just by spending their points, and this fixes your mana, gives you onslaught, gives you frenzy, and endurance charges. So it's very nice to have. I also here have a large cluster. This is a very cheap cluster. It cost me 20 C to get all of those 3 passive effects, and you want to get all 3 of them. They're very good. And get both of the jewels. Here I have a determination and wrath, watch as I, which is also very, very good. It's not very expensive, this one. At least it wasn't when I bought it. It's a bit more now. I bought this for 1.5 divines. But still 3 divines, not too expensive. And you don't need it to get this build going, right? That's very important. You don't need impossible escape. You do not need this watch as I, and you do not need the large cluster jewel. They're good to have, obviously, but this whole setup has about 10 to 13 million DPS. You don't need all of that to get the build going. So keep that in mind. I also need a lot of stats, and the reason for that is because we are using a Paradoxica, which needs 212 dexterity, and we are using a Wrath, which needs 158 intelligence at level 20. So I have brute force solution here, and I have a fluid motion here. And that basically fixes all of our stat requirements with just a couple of rolls on your gear. For ascendancy, I opted to go into determined survivor first. You need block to make this build work. I leveled with this build. I wouldn't really recommend it. It's not bad, it's just slow, because you are waiting for the enemies to hit you, and like things like Atava is pretty sketch to try, but you can do it. It's just a bit slow. I went determined survivor. After that, measured retaliation, more than skill, and lastly, war of attrition. I will leave the POV in the description for the video itself, and you can check all of this at your own leisure. And I think that's pretty much it. We talked about the skills, the gear, the passives. There's not much more that needs to be mentioned, I don't think. This is just passive trees, doesn't really matter. And yeah, that's pretty much it. If you have any further questions or any suggestions for the build, drop them down in the comments below. I'm happy to hear from all of you. And if you enjoyed this video, consider subscribing to the channel. I'm trying to get monetized, and that would help me out a lot. Thank you. With no further explanation needed, thank you so much for watching. I'll catch you all later. Bye bye.